As mentioned, my name is Anna Bradford. I'm the Division Director for the Division of New and Renewed Licenses at the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So that is my day job. My other role is that I am the chair of the SMR Regulators Forum at the IAEA. So in my job at the US NRC, my division is responsible for regulating the licensing of small modular reactors. You may have seen in the press that we recently completed our technical review of the NuScale small modular reactor. And at the moment, we are reviewing reports related to the BWRX 300 small modular reactor and the Holtec small modular reactor. So again, that's the US NRC. My presentation today focuses on the activities of the SMR Regulators Forum. So the forum, it's based at IAEA. It is not actually a part of IAEA. IAEA supports us. We're very grateful to the support that they provide us as kind of the secretariat of this organization. And why did the SMR Regulators Forum begin? Well, so the idea was first raised at an international project on innovative nuclear reactors and fuel cycles called IMPRO. They had a forum on small modular reactors in Vienna in 2013. And at the time, so this was 7-8 years ago now, there were a lot of SMRs being designed and proposed in multiple countries. In the US at the time, there were 4 designers for SMRs that were making progress. There was NuScale, Holtec, Westinghouse at the time was designing a small modular reactor, and there was another vendor called mPower. So at the NRC, we were looking at, or dealing with, I should say, vendors for 4 different SMR designs, but there were, as you've heard this morning, SMR designs across the world being designed in different countries. And so when NPRO brought together a large group of people to talk about SMRs in general in 2013, some of the regulators that were present at that meeting thought it would be helpful if there was a forum for the regulators themselves to talk about these issues, things related to SMRs that we would be faced with as they start to come before the regulators for approval. And so a significant number of regulators said, yes, this would be helpful given the SMR activities going on in our countries. And so the forum right now is a regulator to regulator group. So it's regulators and TSOs. We have 9 participating countries. You can see here on the slide, Canada, China, Finland, France, South Korea, Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UK, and the United States. We often have other countries inquiring about joining or about perhaps being observers. Sometimes other countries come and observe our meetings. And logistically, we meet twice a year. We usually, up till now, we've always met in Vienna. We've thought about moving it around to locations of the different members. We are actually going to meet in Finland last year, but because of the coronavirus, we were not able to. We hope to do that in the future. And the group itself consists of a steering committee. Each member country has a representative on the steering committee, and then there's a chair and co-chair. Like I mentioned, I'm the chair. IAEA performs the secretariat function. And then we have 3 working groups. We're not required to have 3 working groups. We just thought that was the best way to organize ourselves. And we've stuck with that organization in the years that the forum has been together. So what are the forum objectives? So we put together terms of reference at the beginning of the forum, which started back in about 2015. And the goal is to share regulatory experience among the members. We want to facilitate efficient and thorough regulatory decisions by the regulators that are the members. We want to encourage enhanced nuclear safety across the globe, just like IAEA does, and just like any regulator of nuclear power would like to do. We also want to facilitate international cooperation among regulators performing SMR-related assessments. We've heard this morning the idea of SMR designs being licensed in more than one country. And so, of course, we want to have that international communication channels open so that the regulators can discuss those designs with each other. We also wanted to identify and discuss common safety issues. Even if different regulators are looking at different designs, they might have the same challenges. For example, maybe they do not have a containment or maybe they want to use a smaller emergency planning zone size, and how can we address those in a consistent way? And can we come up with common approaches that all the regulators in the forum believe are appropriate? And then we also want to advise the IEEA if we see a need to revise their guidance documents. For example, if some of their documents had a gap which did not really apply to small modular reactors as opposed to large light water reactors, we hope to identify those and let the IEEA know so they can take that under advisement and decide whether to revise their documents. So outcomes that we shoot for in the regulators forum. One is position statements on regulatory issues. These are policy issues, these are technical issues. In a slide or two, I'll give you some examples of common positions that the SMR Regulators Forum has issued so that you can see the types of things that we're putting out. As I mentioned, sometimes we make suggestions for IEEA documents, either new documents or revising existing documents. We certainly do very well at generation and sharing information that regulators may enhance their regulatory framework. And here, this is not just the regulators that are the members that are participating in the meetings, but we also issue our documents publicly. They're on the IEEA website so that regulators from other countries that maybe are not participants of the forum can see those documents, or designers, if they're interested in seeing what the common positions of the regulators are, can go and look at those. So we try to make that information as public as possible. We also want to understand and describe regulatory challenges that we might all be facing. And then high-level issues that could be raised to international codes and standards organizations. So here, for example, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers is relied on, their code is relied on very heavily by designers in the United States. And are there issues that the ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, needs to address in their codes so that vendors can rely on those in the future? So how does the forum actually work? As I mentioned, we have a steering committee. We also have the 3 working groups. The working groups decide which issues they want to collaborate on with input from the steering committee. This, in reality, what this consists of is us meeting and having a conversation about what challenges are on the plates of the regulators in the forum that we would like the group to focus on and maybe come to common positions for, which we can then rely on in the future. So once we come up with some possible subjects, we assess the approaches that are already in place in member countries. Maybe one country is not sure what to do about an issue, but another country has already addressed that issue and believes they have a path forward. So the working groups will discuss what already exists and can be leveraged or built upon. And then, as I mentioned, we produce issue-specific reports, and those have common positions. So the first phase of the forum, I think I mentioned it started in 2015. It went until 2017. The topics of those working groups at the time were graded approach, defense in depth, and emergency planning zone. And as I mentioned, these reports are available on our website if you would like to see those. Those are the final reports of those working groups. At the end of that pilot phase, the end of that 2.5 or 3 years, the members decided this is a helpful group. We want to continue this group. And so we moved into the second phase of the forum, which went from May 2017 to just this past December. We took a look at the beginning of the second phase of the topics that the working groups were focused on, and we decided it was time to move on some other topics. So for the second phase, the topics were licensing issues, design and safety analysis, and manufacturing, construction, commissioning, and operations. Now, interim reports have been issued on the website for each of these working groups. We're going to be issuing some more interim reports a little bit later this year, and then we will issue the final reports even later this year. So this slide shows you, I mentioned I would show you some examples of common positions. These are the type of things that are in the reports that I mentioned. So these talk about, and I picked these out from a couple different reports. So these are not from one report. This scans across or spans across several different reports. But it talks about, for example, there's clear recognition that SMRs are smaller, but the hazards still require a disciplined application of a set of safety and controls. And I mentioned this one because it was very interesting at the beginning of the Regulators Forum back in 2013, 2014, when we were forming. The question at the time was on the table was, do small modular reactors, are they the same as nuclear power plants? They're very different in design and in their safety controls and in their nuclear inventory. So are they nuclear power plants? That was a genuine question being asked at the time. And I think the unanimous conclusion was yes, they are nuclear power plants. They still require the same amount of I'll say at least discipline in regulating them to make sure that they will still be protective of public health and safety. So you can see there's a common position on here about defense in depth. The third bullet there talks about factory fueled and sealed transportable reactors. We heard some talk this morning about reactors being produced in a factory. So the regulators, so let me back up. There's a distinction between, as we've heard, a reactor that's being built on a site. You built it piece by piece, and then you load the fuel, and then you close up the containment, and then you start up the reactor. And then there's a whole other approach where you build the entire small reactor in a factory, including putting in the fuel and closing up the containment and sealing it, and then you ship the entire thing to the site where it's going to be used. Well, that could be a challenge for the regulator just because that's not the model we're used to. So if the entire reactor is being constructed at a factory, for example, does the regulator need to have inspectors at that factory? I mean, I think the answer is yes, we should, but that's a new approach that we need to think about and figure out how we're going to apply our regulatory frameworks to those. And then the last bullet talks about the need to instill an appropriate nuclear safety culture among all the suppliers, because like I mentioned again, if the reactor is built at a factory, those factory workers need to have the safety culture, not just the reactor operators at the end of the manufacturing supply chain. So just there's many, many more common positions. If you look at our reports, these are just some that I pulled out as examples. So phase 3, we're just starting phase 3 now. The topics for our working groups, for the licensing working group, they're going to be looking at mutual recognition of regulators' assessments and collaboration. We heard some mention earlier today. Sorry, I just realized I keep saying this morning, but I guess for some of us, just earlier today, about it being challenging if each country has its own regulatory requirements and a designer is trying to market their design in many different countries, and each country requires different things, and then maybe the design has to be changed, and that costs money. So what can we do about mutual recognition of each other's assessments as regulators? They're also going to take a look at identification of legal constraints and organizational capabilities. And then the design and safety assessment working group will be looking at security by design. This is a very big issue with small modular reactors. As you can imagine, if you think of a large light water reactor, they might have tens or maybe hundreds of guards. But if you have a small modular reactor that has a much smaller footprint, what is the appropriate security posture for the operator to have? And that's a question that regulators have been thinking about, as well as safeguards by design and containment confinement. The containment confinement issue has to do with some designs would say they don't need a typical containment. The large reinforced building isn't necessary because the fuel itself maybe could never melt down because of the way it's designed and therefore can't lead to a release. So why do you need the containment or confinement? So it's just another ongoing conversation. And then the maintenance, construction, commissioning, and operation working group will be talking about the regulatory oversight of long lead structure systems and components procurement. Again, that can be a challenge for the regulator. And organizational stakeholders capabilities. Again, how do you make sure that everyone along the entire line, the supply line, is really capable of doing nuclear grade construction and operation? So that was the SMR Regulators Forum specifically. I wanted to just mention that the IEEA is doing a lot of other work on SMR safety requirements. They're looking at their own documents to see if there are gaps with respect to SMRs. These are some of the activities. You can see those here on the screen. And the next item I wanted to mention is the IEA is also compiling experience of member states who have already gone through the process of licensing SMRs, or at least have done a lot of work preparing to license SMRs, and they'll be documenting that in a document that they will be issuing publicly. So just in summary, there is a lot of work, a lot of activity worldwide related to SMRs, you know, in each country, at the IEA, at the NEA in Paris, just a lot of organizations worldwide. And I think all the members of the Regulators Forum would say that the forum has been a very useful and productive group for exchanging information among regulators. The information produced by the forum has been helpful to the members of the forum, other regulators, industry, as I've mentioned. And we are really looking forward to continue our work for the purpose of enhancing safety, security, and efficiency in SMR regulation. And here I just wanted to put up the SMR Regulator Forum webpage. You can see, if you could scroll down here, you would see the links to all of the reports that we've issued. And I encourage you to go look at those if you're interested in the common positions of the members. And that is it for my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thanks, thanks, Anna. That's you raised a lot of a lot of the questions that have been talked about before. Earlier this afternoon, where I'm standing, and this morning for you, in your presentation. So, starting at the broad level, coming back to some of the things that you mentioned, what would you say are the sort of main barriers in terms of licensing and regulation related to SMRs that you address in your work?
So sorry, I'm sitting here thinking I have my NRC hat on, but I also have my SMR Regulators Forum hat on, and I'm not sure those are the same answer, but at least for the SMR Regulators Forum, I think that one big challenge right now is the different requirements in the different countries, and the fact that, not that that's a particular technical challenge, but it can be a challenge to getting a wide dissemination to one design when, like I said, if they have to go to each country and change their design, and that takes time and money, that can be quite a hurdle. If I was answering for the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission, I think I would say one significant challenge would be just the fact that we have decades of experience with large light water reactors. And now looking at small modular reactors, which can be very different, it can be quite a mindset change, not just for the regulator, but for the industry, for the stakeholders, for the vendors and the constructors. It just, again, it can be overcome, but it's also a little bit of a challenge.